another quick nest using the same image of the baby. So with this one, I've kept her very close to the fabric that she was photographed in. So as I was saying with the other video, this is one of the best colors to be able to change on your hue and saturation slider. It's just it's a mid-tone orange, and I find that it does change into other colors very, very easily. So the nest I'm going to use is this one here, and I'm going to bring that across into my image, the baby. So I'm going to free transform. I'm holding my shift key while I bring her down to the size that she's going to pop into that nest. I can already see that there's a little bit of a difference with the color, so I'm going to have to do a bit of a color correction with when I'm doing all of my blending to make it a little bit more orange, I think, on the bottom. I think that will suit the nest nicely. So I'll do that as we go. So what I'm going to do is, now I've got her about where I think she should go, I'll do a mask. I'll invert that mask with Control I, and I'm going to paint her back in 100% with a white brush. I'll just get a whiter brush. I always start with the middle and make sure I've got every part of the baby. There's nothing worse than retouching an image and realizing later on that you've missed a part of the baby. So I kind of just go around the edge quickly to give us a rough idea of what we're working with in terms of getting her size right, her positioning, that kind of thing. So I'll move her around. I think she kind of needs to be about there maybe, so she feels a bit balanced. I kind of like that size for her in there. So what I'll do now that I've got her there is I'll start to look at the head area, and I will always bring that right back. So with my black brush, I tend to start with the head and get that right back. I can always bring part of that back later on, but if I get an idea of where the edge of her head is, then I know that I'm not going to get any of that fluff coming over to the flowers. So I might even make my brush smaller still, because I want to have a really nice hard edge on the top of her head so it doesn't look photoshopped. So I'll just get that. This is the part where I really just want to make sure we get that right, and then we can take away using a bigger brush at a reduced opacity. So I'm now down to, so basically I'm taking away the top image with a brush of about 20%, so it's my black brush. So I'm going to bring that back and slowly start to blend those two. So what I'm doing is finding lines in the top and bottom and trying to match them up so that it looks like they really should be together, that they're one. And then I'll address the color issue and a bit more shadowing up here a bit later on. So you can see how I'll just try and follow the curves of some of these things so that it looks like they've combined. So you can see how I've just followed that line along there. This is where, you know, your creativity comes in. I want to lift that darkness there. So you can see they're kind of looking blended, like they're meant to be, like they're not two separate fabrics come together. So again, I'm at 20%, and whenever I feel like I've done a little bit too much, I will just bring that back. So then I can just bring it back now at 20%. I'll bring that back around that flower. Here we go. So it's looking kind of nice and blended in there. Got that. So basically I'm just using the black and white brushes. I'm swapping between them to get that nice blend that I'm looking for. So if it tends to look a bit dark, well, I'll bring in the white brush. So you can see there now, I'll just do that. You can see how that's come in there. So what I'm going to do now is come out, because I think you do need to come out to see where your shadowing needs to go. So I will do a curves layer. I'll bring it down. I'll invert that, and then I'll bring it underneath the baby, so that now I'm going to put a bit of shadowing behind her head, because naturally shadowing will fall here. I need my white brush because I'm painting back that layer, so I just put some shadowing there, because those flowers would be darker, because we're wanting her head to look like it's on top or beside the flowers, and that would create that shadow along the side. So make sure it's a little bit darker along here, because she is, again, like her head is creating a shadow in there. So I'll show you turning that on and off. You can kind of feel that now. I'm getting a feeling there's a bit of grayness and there's an oversaturation now because I brought that curves layer in, so I'll address that a bit later. I will make sure I'm happy with the edging, and then we can address with some other layers over the top. But what I want to do is bring in another curves layer over the top, because I want to address that highlight on her wrap. So I'm bringing that in, and I'm going to paint that about 13%. I only need a little bit of a pop there on that top. I just don't want your eye to go to that part of her wrap. So what I might do now is just go and run an exposure lift, because I feel like I want to lift that side of her face a little bit. So that's just an action that I've built there that just automatically saves me time having to create a layer. So I'll just lift a little bit of her face there, a little bit along the top of her body. So let me just see how that looks there. You can see that we're just trying to create a sense that there's light hitting her in the way that it would normally go. So now I'm looking and I see a little bit of grayness, bluishness here. So what I'm going to do now that I'm happy with this, I might do one quick little run over to make sure there's nothing missing on her. So I'm just going over with that brush, and now I might flatten my image, and now I'm going to start to do a layer over the top to now address some of the bluish tones in there. So what I'm going to do is do a color balance layer. I'm going to pop a bit of red in the mid-tones and shadows, and then I will paint that back in where I want it. So I want that wrap to be a little bit more red. So I'm just going to pop that around there. Because that's all orange, I want that to match it a little bit more. So the top layer is a little bit more greyish in tone, so I just want to get rid of that greyish tone by popping in a bit more of that redness to balance out the bluish tone there. So I'll just drop that over. You can see how that, and then I can bring that back. So what I'll do now is just bring it back a little touch. So what I'll do now is there's a little, feel like there's a little bit too much saturation around here because we did the curves layer. So what I'll do is just reduce my saturation a touch there. I'll invert that, and then I'll just pop that back in along there when I feel like it's a bit overly saturated around here, because sometimes when you do your curves layer it comes in and it's a bit saturated, so you can see how that's just softened that part around there. So what I'll do now, it's getting close to finish because I don't really like to spend a lot of time on these images, because you do want them to remain cost effective. So you want to get to a point where you're shooting them and then putting them together very quickly. It does take time to get the skills, but it definitely is something that you want to aim towards being able to do, especially if they're in a package, just depending how you're selling them. I sell them as a normal image in my package, so I don't really want to be creating things that take me hours and hours. So while it's great to be creative and do great setups, it just means then that you've got to find a price point to be able to sell that image at that price point. And it's fine, it's just a matter of making sure that your clients want all those things. My clients generally just like the basic shots, not overly complicated outdoorsy shots with lots of animals. I've found that anytime I've done that, they generally don't purchase those. So I kind of just stick to what I know is going to sell, and I enjoy making as well, so you've got to enjoy it. I might just finding a layer over here. my warm-up. I might just warm up some of her arms there. I'll do a warm-up layer, which is one of my actions, and I cannot say where I've got that from, but I just will paint back. Sometimes I'll just run an action and paint it back at a low opacity. So I'll just warm up the inside there of her hands. Right, so I'm happy with that. Now I'm going to give a nice haze layer over the top. It's how I kind of finish off the layer, the image. Just put a nice haze over the image. Usually do it at about between 20 to 30%. And I'm not sharpening her because I've already sharpened her image coming out. Sorry, the image that came into the actual composite, so I don't need to sharpen her face up anymore. So I'm just going to take the red out of her skin there and paint it back because I'm just noticing there's a little bit too much pink tone in her skin, so I'm just going to paint that back out on that side there. So I'll show you that. Just taking a bit of that pinkness out of her face there. So I'll flatten that, so that's all done.